Well, one of the things that needs to happen is we need to reestablish trust with the public. There's a lot of skepticism, and I think it's grounded skepticism. And even though, this was a rare event, because most drilling, of course, doesn't have an accident, nevertheless, it's what the public remembers. So it's not only confidence in regulations, but also, I think, for the industry, getting the balance right between, making a safety case. So what is prescribed and what is prescriptive, i.e. what regulators do. What do you think the proper balance there should be?
Well, the proper balance, in my mind, is that you need to give the flexibility to the operator to allow them to take account of all the risks and address them. But on the same side, as a regulator, you have to give confidence to the public that you have given regulations that they think describe and prescribe actions that must be taken. If they don't have that confidence to go up and say that the risk was addressed, they're going to fail that we failed, and it's going to come back and really haunt us.
Graham, you want to jump in, then Elisabeth? Yeah.
I think if I think of legislation which has worked, I would point in a dramatic sense, and I would actually point it over 90. If you went back 30 years, then tankers were responsible for 40% of actual oil spillage from any source in the United States, and that includes storage, production, refining. Today, that's 2%. And because that legislation drove the right type of behavior. So legislation should have two aims, I think. One is to make sure that those impacted by an event are treated fairly. But secondly, to drive the right type of behavior. And I think that's the challenge, getting those two things lined up.
Elisabeth?
Yeah, I just want to comment on the balance between performance-based and prescriptive regimes. And I think as a basis, a performance-based regime is extremely important because it emphasizes the thinking around each event, each operation that you're taking on, and that you need to actually address the risks of those individually. It also enables you to take on new technology. It enables you to do the operations more effectively in that way. At the same time, a prescriptive element of regulatory regime is always extremely important. It's the only way you can have efficiency, do the same thing multiple times, and ensure that you can do that as well.
Yes, John, please.
So I would agree with all that, but I think there is still a gap in the industry in the risk assessment piece leading up to that. If you took 5 companies and asked them to risk assess one of these frontier barrier activities, you're going to get 5 different answers. And that is not the standardization we need as an industry.
Well, so what do you think the answer is?
I think there needs to be, one of the issues I was trying to flush out earlier was the difference between regulating on the post-incident side and actually looking more at the prevention side, and in the prevention side a risk framework that has a standardized approach where everybody's going to get to the same sort of answer, come to the same risk tolerance, and then make decisions where we're all clear what it is will be the best way forward.
It's very interesting you pick up on that, because the head of BOMRA, of course the agency which is overseeing the drilling in the US, made a speech recently. And I just want to share with all of you something that he said, because it's very pertinent to what you're saying here. He says he has a vision in the future, because obviously they have some regulations already in place. He says, a set of industry performance standards that requires operators to engage in rigorous and deeply self-critical evaluation of the hazards posed by their operations and the measures implemented to address those hazards. Yeah.
Agreed.
You agree? Everyone agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
What shape would you like to see those standards taking? Yeah. No answer here. That makes me nervous. Yeah. Go ahead.
I would simply go back to the aftermath of the Piper Alpha and the Cullen report and the structure that was put in place after that. That's been you can't argue with success, and that has actually driven success. And when you think about it, if you compare the maritime environment to the exploration production, they're totally different risks. But why would the maritime environment have legislation which is covers the globe, and you wouldn't see this? And you have a body that tries to drive best practices and put the relevant legislation in place through the IMO, and that you don't have the same thing doesn't apply to the exploration production industry.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm sorry. Why did you jump in? No.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think that we need, and we would promote high global standards, prescriptive standards of operations. But at the same time, on top of that, there needs to be an organizational culture of safety, and that is what is required. That is the basis for the Norwegian system, which we promote very much.
Because my understanding, of course, the drilling, there's some very strict regulation on that now, to say the least. But what about vessels? Will vessels operating the Gulf also be subject to new regulations, and do you think they should be?
Yes, I think there's going to be improvement in the regulations on those, and I know the Coast Guard, we're looking closely at that relationship we have with the foreign flag and make sure that we do the proper risk assessment and that we do the examinations to make sure that they meet the standards we need them to be met. One of the tensions, Graham mentioned the international standard, the tension you run into is that countries are going to, it's their own coast.
Yeah.
And to a large degree, they're not going to be necessarily amenable to London or somebody else telling them what the standard will be on their coast. No. So how that can be harmonized, I think would be great, because I think it would pay dividends throughout the world in other countries who may not have the capacity or the competency to do it. We can provide that. So I think there's a lot of plus to be getting that.
Can I ask?
But the world would be better served by as much standardization as we can get, and whether it's through an international body. I mean, we need, these are mobile units that need to arrive to operate at the same standard wherever they were. We can't have differential standards in this industry. We'll never get any trust with the public.
But who takes the responsibility for that? We can see, like with IMO, it can't work because you need unanimous decision making there. So who takes the lead on that?
Wait a minute, it's not unanimous. IMO is not unanimous. It's a 2/3 majority for the most part. So I would disagree there. Okay. IMO, I think, should deserve some consideration, at least on the vessel side.
Okay.
Yes, on the vessel side, the IMO is in the lead, should be so, and we welcome high international standards on this because we are confident that the Norwegian companies can meet them.
Uniform standards, very good. It provides a good platform for developing our industry, our organizations, the skill, and so on. The challenge is that the wider unanimity we should have international, the longer time it takes to come to a conclusion. So if we are in time constraint, we also need to address it quickly. But we all fall back to the fact that the risk is inherent in how do you adhere to the standard you have. And that is a management challenge, I would say.
Okay. Graham, you want to?
I just want to come back to you, the point that you raised, Jeff, because I accept that the marine industry can learn from Macondo, of course, but I just, on what basis do you believe that we should change the legislation in the marine environment?
Well, I guess I was probably saying that it's only natural. Whenever you have an incident, there are going to be some changes. For me to say there's going to be dramatic changes, I can't say that right now. And quite frankly, I don't know that I see any on the horizon. But I think there will be some. I mean, it's inevitable, to be honest with you. But dramatic, I think that would be a stretch too far.
I'm sorry, Elisabeth, please.
I'd just like to comment on that because, of course, the regulations on vessels, as others are developing all the time, so there's no drama in that. What we see, at least, is not only on the regulatory side, but we see that also ship owners in other industries are looking to the Macondo now as a reason to rethink risk and to actually look at those high consequence events and really look at the wider consequence of their worst nightmare, to put it that way, and really sort of use that as a basis for rethinking risk. And I think many industries can learn from that.
I agree with that.